Okay, so Ralph has been left for the weekend. His motorcycle is broken. He's kind of in a fight with the boy, who's in a fight with Brad. Whew. Ralph thought of the old hotel with its shabby lobby warmed by a crackling fire. He missed the reassuring tick of the rasping old grandfather clock. He missed watching TV and the activity in the lobby, the arrival and departure of guests, and the arguments among the staff. He missed old Matt, his kindly protector, and supplies of peanuts and popcorn from the Jumping Frog Lounge. He wondered if his plan to make the little mice leave the lobby had worked, and if Matt still had his job. Ralph discovered he even missed, sort of, his little brothers and sisters and cousins. He wondered if the littlest one still fell over his own feet and got tangled in the fringe of the carpet. He wondered what they would say if they could see him now, cold and lonely, in the vast empty school. He also wondered what they would say if he went home with Ryan, without his motorcycle. Something like, yeah, serves you right for not wanting to share it and give us rides. The scoffing of his relatives was something Ralph could not face. Never. As he walked slowly back to the book bag in the library, he heard a dog bark in the distance and was reminded of the coyotes that howled in the night and the song about the lonely man trying to hitch a ride on the highway. Oh, what a sad, lonely world he lived in. Chapter 7, page 107, The Cucaracha Village Voice. Sometime late Sunday night the weather changed. The snow began to melt. By Monday morning, the fleet of school buses came sloshing through slush. Boots and waffle stompers tracked mud and icy water into the halls of Irwin J. Sneed Elementary School, where the kids were met by Mr. Costa holding a large mop. Ralph, whose weekend had been so long and so lonely, felt such a surge of joy and relief at the sound of school buses. He skittered back to room 5, in a forgiving mood. There, he hid in the old mitten. Anything was better than the long, cold, miserable weekend, and perhaps Ryan had found a way of repairing the motorcycle. Miss Kay's class arrived in a grouchy mood. Snow was fun. Slush was not. There was more confusion than usual as the kids peeled off their jackets and kicked off their boots. Many were carrying clippings from the Cucaracha Village Voice newspaper. Miss Kay was not in the room to welcome them, which did not help. Gordon told Melissa, who was wearing wet shoes and carrying her boots, that he was sure static electricity would not hold a mouse to a sock. Melissa told Gordon he had no imagination. Brad arrived with his arm in a sling. Instantly, a rumor started that Brad had hit Ryan so hard he had hurt his hand. Sides were taken. Arguments began. Ryan glared at Brad. You owe me a toy motorcycle for the one you broke. It serves you right if you hurt your hand. Pfft, the motorcycle you said was a mouse's. What would that stupid mouse do with a motorcycle? Someone dropped a news clipping, and before it was picked up, Ralph was able to glimpse a picture of himself, looking small and frightened in the goldfish bowl. The picture wasn't bad. In fact, it was quite good. His eyes were bright, and each hair was distinct. Ralph congratulated himself on being such a handsome mouse, and wondered if Matt, back at the inn, if he still worked there, would see the picture and recognize and maybe even miss Ralph. As the last bell rang, Miss Kay hurried into the room with a worried look on her face. Instantly, she was surrounded by excited kids, waving clippings from the Cucaracha Village Voice and trying to talk all at once. It wasn't like that at all, they said. That reporter got it all wrong. It's a bunch of lies. They didn't even put our picture in the paper. Most puzzling was, Ralph isn't that kind of mouse. He's nice. They're behaving like a bunch of little mice, thought Ralph. At the same time, he wondered uneasily what the newspaper had said about him. That he wasn't nice? Impossible. Miss Kay stood without speaking at the front of the room. Gradually, the class grew quiet. That's much better, students, said Miss Kay. Amazing, thought Ralph. The teacher had silenced the class without using a single bad word. He was even more ashamed now of the way he had treated his little relatives. After the class recited the liberty and justice for all, but not for me, thought Ralph, Miss Kay said, Class, we have a lot to talk about this morning, and we can't talk if we all speak at once. Brad, suppose you begin by telling us what happened to your arm. Brad looked embarrassed. I just sprained it when I tried to ride my bike in the mud. I was trying to get ready for the first motocross race this spring. The class respected what Brad had tried to do, and Ralph was struck by a sudden thought. Brad was exactly the sort of kid who would understand a mouse who rode a motorcycle. To change the subject, Brad asked, Is Ralph going to try and run that maze again? How about it, Ryan? Asked Miss Kay. Did you bring Ralph to school today? He's lost. Ryan sounded worried. He got mad. He got mad Friday afternoon and disappeared. I'm not lost, Ralph said to himself. I know right where I am. I'm right here in this mitten. A sigh of disappointment ran through room 5. The class liked Ralph. Besides, watching a mouse in a maze was more fun than social studies or spelling. Miss Kay, said Gordon, even if Ryan finds Ralph, I don't think he should have to run the maze again. He proved there was a better way to get to the peanut butter than running into dead ends. Why, he's right, thought Ralph, perked up by Gordon's support. I'm smarter than I thought I was. Class, do you agree? Asked Miss Kay, who wanted her kids to think. The class thought. Brad was first to think. Well, in motocross racing, it's against the rules to get off your bike. I think he cheated. Several people were quick to point out that testing intelligence with a maze was not the same thing as racing on a bike, even a bicycle motocross. Maybe he was too amazed to do it right, suggested Melissa with a giggle. Well, I think he proved he was gifted and talented. Gloria spoke as if she had ended the discussion by using the words the school used to describe children like her. Miss Kay asked for a show of hands. 21 kids agreed that Ralph had found a better way to run the maze. 5 thought he had cheated. Case closed. Ralph was an unusually smart mouse, something he had only doubted once in a while. Speaking of solving problems, said Miss Kay, do you think fighting is a good way to settle arguments? No, chorused the girls. Ryan defended himself. Brad pushed me first. Besides, it wasn't a fair fight. I had Ralph in my pocket. I was protecting him and didn't want him to get hurt. What do you have to say, Brad? Miss Kay asked. He made me mad, always bragging about how smart his mouse is, and then trying to make the maze easy. Brad slid down in his chair. Anyhow, how was I supposed to know he had his old mouse in his pocket? Ryan muttered to Brad, just because you get to come to school in a tow truck, you think you're so big. Well, just because you get to live in a hotel, you think you're better than everybody, mumbled Brad. These remarks were lost to the class because the girls, bored with the scuffled discussion, were waving their clippings from the newspaper. Miss Kay, said Gloria, I think the reporter was unfair. What she said about us was all wrong. Some members, protesting that their families didn't get the newspaper, demanded to know what the article said. Miss Kay read the headline aloud. Class nabs Sneed invader. What's she talking about? Wondered Ralph, moving from the mitten to Melissa's overturned boot for a better view. What invader? Miss Kay continued. Under Ralph's picture, the story reads, Friday afternoon, the 5th grade class of Miss Bambi Kuchenbacher at Irwin J. Sneed Elementary School exhibited a mouse thought to be one of the many mice overrunning their school. They also discussed the harm rodents do to crops and food supplies, and the rapidity with which they multiply. There was a murmur of disapproval from the class as Miss Kay read on. When informed of the mouse plague at the monthly meeting of the school board Friday night, Superintendent Clyde R. Crossman promised a full investigation of conditions at Sneed. Ah! The class sat in outraged silence. Ralph was aghast. One tiny mouse, an invader overrunning the school by himself? Suddenly everyone had something to say. Ah, our exhibit wasn't like that at all. We're having fun and she made our school sound terrible. Poor little Ralph didn't invade us. Ryan brought him to school. She made our school sound dirty, and Mr. Costa, the custodian, worked so hard. She was mean not to put our picture in the paper. Aw, she stayed for like 2 minutes and didn't understand what we were doing. Gordon felt like he was to blame for the story. Well, I didn't mean to get Ralph investigated. I just wrote facts I found in the library books about mice in general. I didn't mean Ralph personally ran around harming the crops. Just how am I going to get investigated? Ralph was beginning to wonder. Ralph was pleased that someone else was in the wrong. I think the reporter's a rat fink, was his contribution to the discussion. Miss Kay asked if he could find a better way to express himself. After a moment, Brad said, I think that reporter just said what she wanted to say. Didn't care about us. One boy said, My dad says bad news sells more than good news. Everybody agreed the reporter saying bad things about the school in order to sell more newspapers was mean, unfair, and downright sneaky. They did good things at their school, and it should have said so. Melissa said, I think we should all write letters to the newspaper and say their story wasn't true, and that there is, or was, only one mouse here. Splendid idea, Melissa, said Miss Kay, always eager for a new project. We can write letters for our language arts today. However, I think we should be careful that we tell the truth. Of course Room 5 would tell the truth. Room 5 always told the truth, except when they fibbed a little. Miss Kay continued, Can we be sure that Ralph was the only mouse in school? Our principal told me in the morning, after reading the article in the newspaper, the cafeteria workers reported a hole in a bag of sugar and tail tracings in the spill. And a 4th grade teacher reported seeds had disappeared from their art project. And the librarian said she found shredded parts of bags. And the 1st grade teacher, she found tooth marks in a jar of paste. This silenced the class, but made Ralph feel terribly guilty. He was just a little mouse, trying to get along in the world. He hadn't meant to cause so much trouble. And I'm going to run out of time.